One quiet evening, Beyoncé wrote a letter from the heart to a young African president whose courage moved her soul. What he wrote back brought tears to many eyes. In the heart of Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, President Ibrahim Traore awoke early to face yet another day of challenges. The sun was already shining intensely over the dusty streets of the capital, where the scent of acacia mixed with the sound of children heading to school. Traoré, a young leader who had just finished a long meeting with his cabinet, discussing ways to improve security and education for the people of Burkina Faso. He had chosen to lead with courage and sacrifice. That morning, as he reviewed documents in his office at the presidential palace, an unusual envelope caught his attention. The envelope bore the stamp of the United States and contained carefully handwritten script. Intrigued, Traoré slowly opened it, revealing a letter signed by Beyoncé Giselle Knowles-Carter, world-famous as Beyoncé. The text began simply, "Dear President Traoré." The words were direct, but carried depth. Beyoncé spoke about her journey through the streets of Houston marked by violence and overcoming adversity, and expressed admiration for Traoré's struggle against oppressive systems. Traoré felt something unusual while reading. It wasn't just a letter from a famous artist. It was a sincere declaration of solidarity between two seemingly distant worlds. He realized that there was no political or financial interest involved, only mutual recognition of battles fought in different contexts. As he reflected, he thought about how this exchange could inspire other African leaders to stand firm in their convictions. News of the letter quickly reached the president's close advisors. Among them was Marie, his communications advisor, a visionary woman who always advocated for the role of African youth in politics. She suggested that Traoré respond personally, turning this exchange into a broader symbol. "This is a unique opportunity," she said, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. "We can use this to strengthen our global message." However, not everyone around him shared the same view. General Sankara, a veteran of local politics and Traoré's informal mentor, warned of possible repercussions. "You need to think carefully before exposing our country this way," he said, concerned. Western powers might interpret this as a strategic move. Despite this, Traoré knew he needed to respond. This letter wasn't only addressed to Beyoncé, but to all those fighting against marginalization. As he considered these conflicting opinions, Traoré began mentally drafting his response. He wanted to capture the essence of what it meant to be a leader truly connected to the people. At the same time, he thought about how to convey hope without sacrificing authenticity. It was a delicate but necessary challenge. That night, beneath the stars lighting up the African sky, Traoré decided to do something innovative. He wouldn't write just a letter. He would create a symbolic bridge between Africa and the diaspora. Inspired by Beyoncé's words, he was now moving toward a greater connection, determined to transform pain into strength and silence into voice. At dawn the next day, Ibrahim Traore sat at his desk in the presidential palace, facing a blank sheet of paper. He knew his reply needed careful crafting, for it was not merely a personal exchange, but a symbolic dialogue between Africa and its diaspora. The distant sound of traditional drums echoed through the streets of Ouagadougou, reminding him of the deep cultural roots he represented. Pen in hand, Traoré took a deep breath and began to write. His letter opened with a simple yet respectful greeting. "Dear Beyoncé," he avoided excessive formality, choosing instead a human tone that reflected the sincerity of the message he had received. In the opening lines, Traoré described his own journey from his days as a soldier to his rise to power in Burkina Faso. He spoke of the challenges faced by the Burkina people and his determination to fight against external forces seeking to exploit the natural resources of the African continent. As he wrote, Traoré was interrupted by Marie, his communications advisor, who brought some suggestions to enrich the letter. She proposed including historical references to the anti-colonial struggle led by Thomas Sankara, whose legacy still inspired many in the country. "This is an opportunity to connect past, present, and future," she said enthusiastically. Traoré agreed, realizing this approach would give even more weight to the message. However, not everyone was satisfied with the idea of Traoré expressing his thoughts so openly. General Dakar, ever pragmatic, remained concerned about potential diplomatic consequences. During a meeting with other advisors, he argued the letter could be misinterpreted as a direct confrontation with Western powers. "We should consider the consequences before acting impulsively," he warned, crossing his arms in disapproval. Despite the concerns, Traoré was determined to proceed. He knew Burkina Faso's story was not just a local one. It was part of a global narrative of resistance and dignity. Inspired by Beyoncé's words, he continued writing, sharing reflections on Black youth and their crucial role in building a better future. He spoke of how collective pain can become strength when guided by purpose and unity. By the end of the day, the first draft of the letter was ready. Traoré reread each line, adjusting small details here and there to ensure the message was clear and impactful. He knew these words had the potential to transcend borders, connecting people who, despite being geographically apart, shared similar struggles. It was more than a letter. It was a call to action. That night, as he walked through the palace gardens, Traoré reflected on the meaning of this exchange. He imagined Beyoncé reading his reply and wondered how that woman coming from the streets of Houston would interpret his words, despite cultural and contextual differences. Both had found ways to turn adversity into opportunity. And now through this letter they were building something greater, a bridge of empathy and understanding. At dawn on the third day, Ibrahim Traore sealed the envelope containing his response to the American singer. He knew that this letter was more than a simple diplomatic gesture. It was a statement of principles and an invitation for global reflection. With steady hands, he handed the envelope to his personal assistant, Musa, a young idealist who had always admired the president's progressive vision. "Make sure it reaches the right hands," Traoré said, looking directly into Musa's eyes. The letter was sent through a secure channel, ensuring no external interference during the process. While waiting for Beyoncé's reply, Traoré began to notice the first signs of reactions within Burkina Faso. The local press, always attentive to the president's moves, quickly uncovered the exchange. Speculative articles began to appear, highlighting the symbolism of the initiative. For many, it was clear evidence that Traoré was willing to use all available tools to amplify his people's voice. However, not everyone shared this positive view. During a parliamentary session, some opponents criticized Traoré's decision to correspond with such a controversial international public figure. They argued that this could weaken the country's position in future negotiations with Western powers. The opposition leader Tundi was particularly vocal, accusing Traoré of prioritizing media attention over urgent domestic issues. "We should focus on the economy, not letters to celebrities," he exclaimed, prompting murmurs among those present. Meanwhile, beyond Burkina Faso's borders, news of the letter also gained attention. In the United States, journalists and political analysts began discussing the meaning of the exchange between Traoré and Beyoncé. To many, it was an inspiring example of how public figures could use their influence to promote important dialogues. In Malibu, Beyoncé Carter reads the letter carefully, deeply moved by the president's sincere words. She recognized in the message a strength that transcended cultural differences. Back in Ouagadougou, Traoré faced new internal challenges. The pressure on him increased as allies and adversaries debated the merits of his decision. Marie, his communications advisor, suggested organizing a press conference to explain the letter's purpose and dispel misunderstandings. "We need to control the narrative before it gets out of our hands," she said, concerned. Traoré agreed, but he knew any public statement would need careful planning to avoid further controversy. During preparations for the press conference, Traoré reflected on the long-term impact his letter might have. He imagined young Africans reading about the exchange and feeling inspired to seek change in their own communities. This idea comforted him as he knew his mission extended beyond governing Burkina Faso. It was about planting seeds of hope that could blossom in future generations. He saw the letter as a small step towards something much greater. That night, while watching the stars shine over the capital, Traoré felt grateful for the opportunity to connect with someone so distant yet so close in spirit. He knew the future was uncertain, but he was certain that authentic gestures had the power to transform realities. Now all that remained was to wait for Beyoncé's response and see how the world would react to this unexpected bridge between two worlds. Days later, in her luxurious home in California, Beyoncé Carter held Ibrahim Traore letter with reverence. She had read the Burkina Faso president's words multiple times, each line touching something deep within her soul. This was a message that transcended borders and contexts, connecting two seemingly distant realities united by the struggle against oppressive systems. Inspired, she decided to respond immediately, accompanied by a video she recorded herself. In the video, she addressed African youth directly, encouraging them to turn their challenges into opportunities and that she will visit Ouagadougou soon for a concert. In Ouagadougou, the arrival of Beyoncé's response caused excitement. Marie Traoré's communications advisor suggested sharing the video on social networks and local media channels to amplify its message. She knew it could inspire millions of young people, not only in Burkina Faso, but across Africa. The president agreed, seeing in this gesture a chance to strengthen ties even further between Africa and the diaspora. However, the international reaction was not uniformly positive. Some Western analysts interpreted the letter exchange as a strategic political move, accusing Traoré of seeking global attention rather than solving internal problems. These criticisms echoed in Burkina Faso, where political opponents tried to use the episode to undermine the president's popularity. Tundi, the opposition leader, organized protests in several regions, demanding focus on urgent economic matters. Despite this, most of the population received the initiative enthusiastically. In schools and universities, students debated the messages from both leaders, finding inspiration in them. On the streets of Ouagadougou, banners began to appear depicting Traoré and Beyoncé side by side, symbolizing unity between Africa and the diaspora. For many, this exchange represented something greater, the possibility of overcoming historical divisions and building genuine bridges. Watching the video recorded by Beyoncé, Traoré felt deeply moved. He realized that this unexpected connection had the potential to reshape old narratives and create new forms of global dialogue. During a press conference, he spoke about the importance of public figures using their platforms to advocate for larger causes. "This exchange isn't about the two of us," he said. "It's about everyone fighting for dignity and justice anywhere in the world."